Just going to do a little breakdown on kind of approaches to mental health issues, okay? So this is just to remind you that risky behaviours and things don't just affect rich people or poor people, it's everyone. That's low decile schools in Mareko, high decile schools, not much difference really, okay? So don't go by socioeconomic level. And then this one is just to reiterate that protective factors really work. So this is a protective factor of eating family meals together. And you can see that if you have 2 times a week or less, it's reduced a little bit, but 7 times a week, look this, halved. Binge drinking, current smoking, suicidal thoughts. This is from a Youth 2000 study. So they work. The protective factors, really important to look for them. If they're not there, put them in place if you can. So just going to quickly rush on. Oh, okay. So we're going to be thinking about some issues. One of the big issues that somebody talked about was what more on is an approach to alcohol and other drug use. So really we want them to change, don't we? Doctors and nurses just want people to change. Is that right? If you think you can, then go home now because you'll end up bitter and twisted because you can't change anyone. But just think about the last time you made a plan to change something, a behavioural thing or, yeah, probably a behavioural thing. What was the thing you did?
Goals.
Set some goals, yeah? Made a plan, yeah? Yep. Did you tell anybody your plan?
Lots of people.
Lots of people, great. Anybody not tell anybody their plan? Yeah, somebody's honest. And you didn't tell anybody your plan because?
Fear of failure.
Because if you don't tell anybody, nobody knows you failed. Whereas if you tell people, they know you know, they know you know. So what you can do, you can't change anybody, but you can help them to tell you their plan. Because you're more likely to keep to it, aren't you? So that's all we can do. So with this is my kind of mnemonic, if you like, for motivational interviewing. So my mnemonic's beards. So if you tell somebody what you think they should be doing, you've robbed them of the opportunity to tell you. Okay, so the first letter is B, bite your tongue. Because if you tell them what to do, and we're so good at that, aren't we? Especially with young people. You've robbed them of the opportunity, so you're not going to be able to tell you what they plan to do because you've just told them. So bite your tongue, really important. Next one is actually for any counselling, any communication stuff, express empathy. What do you think that means for young people?
Acknowledge how they're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I like to think, have anybody come across LAVAR? Not the organisation, but the kind of concept. It's a lovely concept in Pacifica culture. And it's kind of like, there's the I space, and this is how Daniel Siegel puts it, but it's the same as LAVAR. There's the you space, and what we're trying to reach is the we space. So you're trying to go, and LAVAR says, there's a space between two people where you negotiate how you're going to work together. And I think that's a lovely concept. We're trying to work with somebody in a shared space of thinking. And I think that's expressing empathy. Really trying to kind of, you can't imagine what it's like, you can't know what it's like to be somebody else, but you can try and meet together in that shared space between you. So that's express empathy. Avoid argument. Isn't that so difficult? Anybody had an argument with somebody who emotionally believes something?
Yeah.
Ever won? Emotional argument always beats logical argument. I don't know about you, and you two might be different, but I found young people love arguing. Yeah, I drink a bottle of bourbon a day. Tell me not to. Come on. Yeah, tell me to use condoms. Come on, come on. I'll give you thousands of reasons why I'm not going to. So, how do you avoid argument? Finding some common ground, yep, that's a really good way, yep.
Keep your own emotions in check.
Totally. First rule of parenting, always keep your own emotions in check. I love the t-shirt that says, no, you calm down. I find the best thing to do is agree to differ, in that I think it's really important you say what you think. Otherwise, you know, I had one young person who came out of the doctor's surgery saying, oh, the doctor said I could smoke. I'm sure he didn't, but he didn't say not to. You know, a bit like Trump and his, anyway. The important thing is, no, yeah, I believe you shouldn't smoke. This is the reasons why. You believe that it's fine to smoke, doesn't do you any harm, so let's agree to differ. But we've clearly stated, I respect your opinion, I'd like you to respect mine, and we'll agree to differ. And I find that's the easiest way of doing it, otherwise you're there for half an hour. But everybody's got their point across, which is the thing to do, and you've respected their opinion, which is important. Roll with resistance, I don't know what this means. Anybody know what roll with resistance means?
Accept that you're not going to win.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, roll with it. Okay. I must admit, some people, I used to think it meant rolling with it to the conclusion that it might lead to. And I once said to somebody, so you're going to stop smoking? You're not going to stop smoking? I said, okay, so when do you think you will? You know, what's your marker of when you might change? And she said, and I flippantly said, when you start coughing up blood? And she said, well, I am. So I thought, I'm not going to go down that path anymore. But I like to think of it more as reflect. You know, you said go back to where you last agreed. I think reflecting back on what you've both last agreed on is a much better way of doing it. And it sets you up with those I'm wondering questions. So what does resistance tell you? It tells you what's important to that person. Yeah? Anybody think young people make decisions differently from older people? Do you think that teenagers make decisions differently from older people? Okay. Last time you make a decision, what did you do? Weigh out pros and cons. Anybody had a pros and cons chart? 2 pros, 10 cons. Still done it? Why? Supposed to have highly developed brains. Because it's it was important to you. Young people are no different. Yeah? They make decisions based on what's important to them, not on the pros and the cons. They might have weighed up the pros and cons, not so formally as you guys did, but you know, they did it because it was important. So if you want to understand motivation, you've got to understand what's important to them. So why should people use condoms? You know, prevent STIs, not get pregnant. Why do people not use condoms? What's more important than that? The moment, but also
Feeling embarrassed.
keeping your boyfriend or your girlfriend. If you don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you're down the tube. Sorry. You guys probably don't feel the same. Some people feel that way. So why would you risk that by insisting on a condom when they said no? You know, so it's what's important. If you don't understand what's important, you'll never be able to do motivation stuff. So next thing, you're wondering why. I'm wondering why it's so important to you. So I'm wondering why it is that you don't want to, that you want to go out drinking every night on a Friday night. You know, and then that leads you up to this last bit where you use the information against them. I mean to help them change. So you say, okay, on the one hand, you said that it's really good to go out drinking on Friday nights. Because what else is to do in Wellington or in Invercargill or wherever. But on the other hand, last time you went out drinking, you've said you ended up vomiting in the gutter. Or you woke up in somebody else's bed and you didn't know quite what had happened. So you're developing discrepancy on the one hand, on the other hand. And then you support self-efficacy. So you actually support them in the decision they've made because you get them to tell you their plan. So next time you go out drinking, what do you think you might do so you don't end up vomiting in the gutter? So a really lovely example of that was a school nurse who was doing kind of HEADDS assessment stuff and found out that the young man went to parties and he took 26 tinnies to the party. And the nurse kind of went through all this and she said, I'm not all that, you know, it's a bit of a worry how much you're drinking because that could lead on to problems. So then she said, so what do you think you might do next time you go to a party? I said, right. I think I might take 16 tinnies instead of 26. Brilliant. He'd thought about it, he'd made a plan, and he told her his plan. Fantastic motivational interview outcome. outcome. So that's just a wee tool that you might want to use on each other, on your partners, at home. I had one young woman who was flatting. You know how there's always somebody in every flat who always does all the work tidying up? And she was making herself sick. Frustration and rage that she, and really resentment. So I said, try this on them. And halfway through, she said, you've been doing this on me, haven't you? I thought, she'll go far. But yeah, try it on everybody. It's quite helpful. Okay, so the next one I'm thinking about, which might be, I'm not going to use the PowerPoint for this, so maybe we could just blank it out. This is just a tool because you wanted to know about anxiety and depression and kind of a way of approaching it. So just briefly, I only work with a whiteboard. Number one, that's how I think, is in pictures a bit more. But number two, when you're working with a young person, especially about something like this, and mental ill health or maintaining mental health, it gives you something to look at. Because you were saying about not eye contact, and not eye contact is partly cultural in terms of Māori. It's a cultural thing. You don't look at the eyes of somebody who's older than you. But also partly because it's too embarrassing. And that's why a lot of young people don't like going to counsellors. I won't ask you just at the moment. But, because you just sit there and you talk about your feelings, which is really hard to do. So if you're looking at the whiteboard together, it's so much easier. It's not nearly so embarrassing. So often when people come in, and sometimes they come in saying, I'm depressed, or I'm really anxious, or I've been sent here by my counsellor. So then you go, okay, so tell me, does that look like you? And they go, yeah. And then you can kind of do a quick HEADDS assessment, because you can say, okay, so I'm wondering what's pushing you under. And then you do, what's pushing you under at home, what's pushing you under at school, what's pushing you under at work, what's pushing you under relationships, what's pushing you under in any groups with friends, any grief experiences, alcohol and other drug use. And at the same time, try and find out what's pushing you up. Who can you talk to? Are you a member of a group? Do you do sport? All those kind of things. Then, when you've got all that information, you can go, okay, so some people call that pushing under factors. They call them oppression. And I actually use that word. And you said, you feel pushed under? Yeah, I feel pushed under. And don't we all? And then I say, okay, so when you feel pushed under like that, what do you feel like doing? And that's where you can bring up things like self-harm, alcohol and other drug use, all that kind of stuff. But mostly what do young people say when they feel really depressed? Where do most people go? You want to withdraw, don't you? And so where's a safe place for young people to withdraw to? The bedroom, yeah. And then you can find out what's going on there. And then you go, but you're not doing that today, you're suppressing it. And have you seen those joke definitions of stress around mugs and things? I love it, it's really good. And it says, the definition of stress is the confusion created in one's mind when one really wants to beat the living daylights out of some arsehole who really deserves it, and you can't. Isn't that a good definition? Yeah, because that's how you feel. Yeah? But you're suppressing it. You can't, can't come out with, you can't do something about your stress, you're suppressing it. Oppression plus suppression equals depression. And then I try and differentiate between low mood, which is bad enough, and the illness. And what I try and do is kind of look at an analogy between cold and the flu. So what's the difference between a cold and the flu?
Severity, progression.
You want to say more? Duration a bit. Well, with a cold, you get a blocked up nose, cough, sore throat, all that stuff. And you get that with the flu, but with the flu, it affects your whole body. And your temperature goes up. You don't get a temperature. So that's quite good education in itself, just to let people know that, the cold isn't the flu. And then you can go, okay, so with low mood, you get all the, you feel down, you feel terrible, you can't concentrate, you keep forgetting things. But when it's an illness, it also affects your whole body. You can't sleep, you don't eat as well as you did, or you might overeat. And then I say, whatever kind it is, there's 4 E's which will be helpful. The first one, oppression plus suppression equals depression, and the cure is expression. And if they don't groan, I do. And expression, so don't use the C word, okay? Because everybody's been to at least 3 counsellors, and often schools now use it as a punishment. Go and see the counsellor. In a way, that's nice that they don't punish them in terms of have the 100 lines or have detention. But at the same time, poor counsellors, there they are with this young person who really doesn't want to be there. So I talk about expression. So what's expression? Talking about some of these problems. What can this person help you to do? So it's not, what can I do for you? It's, what would you like to do? So what would you like to do about mum that's nagging? Not much. Okay, we'll agree there's not much. What would you like to do about work in terms of hours, and how what would you like to tell the boss? And sometimes that's something you can't do, but at the same time you maybe can help them do. So you're empowering them. And what we often do with young people and people who've been through trauma, I think, is re-victimize them by saying, I'll do that for you. And you're taking away their power instead of giving them more power. So it's much more about, okay, there's these problems. What would you like to do? What would you like help with? You can do some of these things on your own. Some of these things you might like to talk or find out how to do them a bit better. And then, so that's expression. And then the next E is eating good brain food. So here it's quite good to know what their future thinking is. So you can say, if you think it's about 3 months, you can say, okay, I'd like you to eat some brain food for about the next 3 months. Your brain's suffering, you've told me that, I don't need to tell you. And actually good brain food might help your brain work better. Don't say, always eat good brain food, it's too long, but just time limit. And then what do you think young people say good brain food is? Don't tell them. What do you think they say? No, they say fruit and veggies. This lot have been brainwashed since kindy, haven't you? Yep. And some of them even say fish oils. It's great. And then you say, do you eat them? No. So really good though. Encourage them, say you don't have to eat them forever. You'd like them to, but you don't have to. Just for the next few months, just while your brain's suffering. And then the next E is exercise. And this is where it really helps if they have done sport in the past. Because then you can say, how did you feel after the sport? And often people do feel much better, don't they? And then you can say, okay, so that's why I want you to do exercise now, because you'll get that feeling back. Some people who want a bit more knowledge, I say, well, when you're exercising, you're producing endorphins and cannabinoids. Because when we first started hunting animals, you had to run a lot and very fast, and it was really painful. So we had made our own pain relief, and we gave ourselves good mood to do it with cannabinoids. So don't buy cannabis, just run around the block, it's free. And then that will do it, if you haven't got the illness. But if you've got the illness, it's really hard to get the energy to actually do all those things. So I tried to think of how do you make medication into an E. So I said, with medication, it gives you the mental energy to do those ones. And this is really helpful for parents because nobody wants to go on medication. But it's really helpful to say that's the package, but the medication helps you do the whole package. And that's why that can be really useful. And I find that's a really good way of explaining to parents and young people. And it's also a quick way of getting a history. So hopefully you can use that. I know one of the school nurses I was talking to once said that they put in, now what did they say? Something to get sleep in. They got an E out of it, but I can't remember what they used, because we do need sleep there as well, because that's very healing in terms of depression and anxiety. So that's a model that hopefully you can use. And are you up for one more? Okay, so one more. And I learnt this from one of the counsellors psychologists at the Youth Specialty Service CAMS service in Christchurch. And I find it really useful. I call it CBT for idiots. So CBT, I think, probably works quite well with young people, purely because it's following the brain development anyway. So you're linking, you know, doing with emotions with thinking, just the same way as brains are developing anyway. And what do most young people present with in terms of if they're coming to a GP or a nurse in terms of mental health stuff?
Tired.
Tired, absolutely, yeah. So you could go from all the causes of tirednesses. How do you manage tired?
I try and keep it into a bit of a HEADDS and sort of explain a bit what's going on in your life.
Great, yeah. And it's really important to address all the physical things, especially the common ones, so anemia and all that kind of stuff. But I'm right up there saying depression is one of those things that can make you tired. And the thing I think that we don't kind of do is we don't link brains with bodies. And of course, they're totally linked. And if the changes happen here, changes happen here, just like we saw with those adverse child experiences.